Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hi, I'm Becky Parker Geist. I am the host of the Audiobook Connection podcast, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association and the founder and CEO of Pro Audio Voices and Amplify Audiobooks. We help authors and publishers with audiobook and podcast production, distribution, and marketing. And I am excited to have with me today Martha Retallick, author of Water Harvesting 101 and City Nature. She is also the host of the new podcast, Water Harvesting 101. Martha, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Great. So let's give our listeners, tell us just a little bit about your background. And, you're in this sort of water harvesting, urban nature space. What got you to this place? And tell us more about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in Pennsylvania. I moved to Arizona as an adult, bought a house here 20 years ago in Tucson. And being a born and raised Pennsylvanian, there was one thing I really wanted at my place, it was lacking when I moved in here. When I moved in here, there was nothing but crushed rock in the front yard and Bermuda grass in the backyard, which is an invasive species in this part of the country. I wanted trees. I mean, Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods, we are the original tree huggers.
Nice.
So I planted trees. But there's one thing you have to consider in this part of the country when you plant anything is, well, where's your water going to come from? And the easy answer to that is, well, it comes out of the water faucet and you pay Tucson Water every month. Well, that can get really expensive really fast. And I was on a first-time home buyer's limited budget. I did not have the money to install an irrigation system or run water through it on a regular basis. So I had to use what are referred to as low water use plants. And so I have, as trees, I have two fully grown ironwoods, one mesquite that live off of rainwater. And they would really like to see some of that stuff around now because we've been in drought since last August. But they're saying that the forecast for this summer is our monsoon season is supposed to come early and be wetter than normal. We hope so. I also am named for a victory gardener who fed 8 people from her garden in upstate New York. So I wanted a garden too. And there again, there's that question, where's your water coming from? If I watered that garden with Tucson water, my water bill would be in the stratosphere. So I do 2 things. Number 1, I have a 1,500-gallon cistern, which harvests rainwater from the back roof, the north side of my house. And right now it's about half full. And I'm nervous because we're in a drought and I want to keep the garden going. And I noticed this morning when I was out watering the plants that, that fig tree looks like it could use a drink. So I gave it 2 watering cans full of cistern water, and I thought, you know what? Poor figster needs some more water. I know what? I'm going to wash the dishes for the fig tree. And at this house, the dishwasher is named Martha. So after breakfast, I washed the dishes, and I washed them into a bucket in the sink. And I took that bucket outside to chuck it, and that water went onto the fig tree, which is looking a lot better. So what I briefly described are the 3 basic activities of water harvesting. Number 1, there's redirecting water away from where you don't want it, like inside my house, which was an issue. I was told that the backyard drained toward the house, and it obviously did, and I had that regraded. There were house floods. I never had any, but previous owners did. I've seen evidence of that. So you want to redirect the water away from where it shouldn't be, like inside your house or right next to it, and out where you do want it, like in my yard, nourishing the trees. Second activity is storing water for later use, like during a drought, and I'm referring to rainwater. And the third activity is, I hate to send perfectly good water down the drain. I hate that. So I did the dishes for the fig tree this morning with dishwater on the tree. I also washed the clothing for the fruit trees. I have 2 pomegranates, the fig, and a lemon. And on laundry day, I don't send that water down the drain. It goes outside and it waters the trees. I have what's called the gray water harvesting system.
Yeah. Now, were you aware of these kinds of systems and practices before you moved to Tucson, or was it really that move that pushed you to figure out a solution?
It happened after I moved here. In Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania, where I grew up, 40 to 50 inches of rain a year. Not a big issue for them. But here, with about 12 inches of rain a year, it's an issue.
Right.
And
right,
of course, there's the easy solution. You can hook up hose to your tap and water your plants and pay Tucson Water a lot of money every month. And I know plenty of people who do that. I come from frugal people. I don't like to spend money on that sort of thing.
Yeah, I have that same reaction. I live in a much wetter area of the country, but the whole notion of sending perfectly good water down the drain is anathema. So, of course, I grew up in New Jersey with a fairly shallow well, so really mattered. We had to be, so I grew up with water conservation being a daily part of my life. Now, let's talk a little bit about your audiobook, your audiobook, and what was it that led you to write your books initially?
Okay, City Nature, the first book, arose from me buying a new camera system in the summer of 2018. And here in Tucson, during the summer, it's a little too hot to go out in public and practice with your camera. And I didn't want to go out and annoy people, come on, Martha, would you hurry up, figure that camera out? So instead, it was time to open up the backyard photography school, and class was in session with my trees, my rocks, and my flowers. And I figured that after a few weeks, I'd get bored and move on to some other topic, but that didn't happen. I started having a really good time in the yard, and I kept right on shooting. And before you know it, I had thousands of photos. And I decided toward the end of 2020, I'm going to make a book out of these. And I worked with a mentor who had me read the entire manuscript aloud to her. And about, every few seconds, she had 20 questions. It made for a much better book. And so last year, when I decided to record, I had both City Nature and its sequel, Water Harvesting 101, professionally recorded. And I gotta say, my mentor, who really made me read every word of that book out loud and questioned me to the nth degree, made for a much better book. That book reads beautifully. Now, Water Harvesting 101, I was attending it only as an audiobook, and then I got it's only as an ebook, and then decided to do the audiobook. At first, I thought, oh, wait a minute, these are photo captions. This isn't going to work in audio. During the production process, the producer said to me, okay, Martha, don't rewrite it. Don't overthink it. We're going to get to this page. What would you say? He put me on the spot, and I extemporized, and that's what he told the narrator. Turned out pretty well. So, yeah, one of them, I inadvertently wrote it for the ear because I had a mentor. And the second one, I was expecting it strictly to be a visual piece that turned into an audio piece. And if you're adapting your visual to audio, it might not be a bad idea to go through your photos and your captions again and think about, what would somebody who's driving down the road, who can't stop and look what you have to say, what would be most important for them to understand about this point that you are making right now? Because if people are listening to audiobooks, take it for granted, they are probably in a position where they cannot read. They have to watch the road. They're at the gym doing a workout. They may be at work where, they may have the headphones on, but they have to look like they're doing the boss's work. They can't be reading.
Yes, indeed. And many times I get the question from authors who are thinking, well, maybe I need to read the book. Maybe I should have a professional narrator. Did you wrestle with that decision at all? Or did you just know, nope, I want to have a professional narrator take this on?
I figured it would be best to hire the professionals because although the podcast for me is easy, I wrote the intro and the outro and I read off the script, but the actual recording of the episode, I extemporize. For the book, you've got to read what's on the page. And there's just something about, oh, there are words on that page and, oh, I've got to read those exactly. Uh-oh, tongue-tied. Whereas the professionals, they have overcome that problem. They know how to do it. Rather than me going through the learning curve of learning how to do that, let's get this done quick. Let's hire the professional. It was done a lot quicker than Martha learning how to read a book out loud.
Yeah, no, you make a really good point, and this is something that, I bring up sometimes when talking about author-narrated projects, is it's a different thing. Being able to, just extemporize or, just to be able to speak off the cuff, to be speaking from the stage, than it is to read text and have it sound as conversational as it's intended to be. So thanks for highlighting that for us.
That's a real skill.
Yeah. And then as you were looking at distribution, well, actually, let me ask another question first about the audiobook production. So I know that you chose Lynn Norris to narrate your Water Harvesting 101. Anything that you might share with our listeners about how you made the decision for the voice? Because this is a question that comes up, like, how do I choose? How do I know what's the right voice for my book?
I wanted somebody who could do the lively storytelling style of city nature, but also have a more instructional style, which is what's needed for Water Harvesting 101. She has both. So rather than this being just one book project with one style of narration, I had two. Storytelling with some animation in there, at the very beginning of the book. She mimicked me as a little toddler seeing a bird in a tree, and I was really excited about this because ever so subtly, my mother was getting me into birding. Thanks, Mom. I still am. Whereas Water Harvesting 101, you're explaining concepts, and because the person is listening to the book, we have to explain those concepts with words. They can't cheat and look at the pictures. Remember, we might be dealing with somebody who's driving a semi down the road. He can't take his eyes off the road, or she's commuting to work. She certainly can't take her eyes off the road.
Yeah. And I love how you're highlighting here that it's important for us to understand what that listener experience is and to craft the audio so that they can listen without having to either turn it off or be inappropriately distracted, that they can follow along and not miss out on anything. That all of these are components of that creating a great listener experience that is so important, I think.
And that's important. It's the listener experience. I'm a photographer, but in this particular venue, the fact that I'm a photographer doesn't matter. It needs to come across through the words. I'm also a designer. Well, designing doesn't count here. It needs to come through the words.
Certainly does. Beautiful. Martha, let's just take a short pause and we'll come right back. Would you like to earn more from your audiobook sales? If you're an author with an audiobook, you may have noticed that royalties from Audible especially, and other platforms as well, are frankly kinda pathetically low, disappointingly low, and unfairly low considering what it cost you in effort and resources to create it. How is it the retailers are the ones making all the money off your work and investment? As someone who started in the audiobook industry in 1981, I've found it frustrating that authors keep getting shortchanged. The good news is that Pro Audio Voices just launched Amplify Audiobooks, a direct sale audiobook platform for authors that puts you back in the driver's seat. Earn 65% of the gross sales price that you set. Compare that to the percentage of the percentage that retailers give. Run promotions on schedule whenever you want. Create coupon codes. Build community with your customers, since you'll know who they are and how to contact them. Work with a caring, responsive, supportive team to help you succeed all along the way. Get help with marketing. Get paid weekly. We're helping audiobook authors who are frustrated by painfully low royalties and the barriers that prevent them from managing their own products and customers. Amplify Audiobooks is a direct sale platform that enables authors to earn much higher royalties and have way more control. We're disrupting the audiobook industry by putting authors first. Get started today at proaudiovoices.app or go to proaudiovoices.com and click on the Distribution Amplify link. Join the movement. So let's jump into the next phase. We talked about audiobook production for your projects. Let's talk a little bit about the distribution piece. As you considered distribution, what was it that led you to Amplify Audiobooks?
What I like about Amplify, and this is something that is very uncommon in the publishing industry. The publishing industry is highly oligopolistic. There are huge tech platforms that dominate the industry in various ways. They do not treat the small independents or the author publishers like me. They don't treat us very well. Let's just shorthand it that way. One of the things I liked about Amplify was that you're paying out the royalties based on the gross price rather than some percentage of the net that is known only to that company. Another thing is, if I'm having a special offer, I get to choose when I do that rather than some tech platform saying unilaterally, oh, we're going to offer your book for free this month. So this is of and by and for the independents rather than the oligopolies.
Yes, indeed. And we were talking actually before we got onto the podcast a little bit about the package that you're going to be offering on Amplify. Would you like to share about that?
Okay. What I'm doing is, if people like city nature, maybe they'd like to listen to Water Harvesting 101 too. Well, can't do that on the big platforms. They only sell singles. They do not sell packages. No way. Amplify, I can do that.
That's right. We give you a lot more control, a lot more options. So great. And we're so glad to have your books on Amplify, your content, your messages. It's so important in these times of climate change and with all our storms and our floods and our droughts that, we're experiencing around the world. And for our listeners, some who might think initially, well, we have plenty of water where I am. Well, that's not necessarily going to be.
What if there's a drought?
Yeah, what if there's a drought? Those things, we're experiencing a very changing climate, so, and I think that the techniques that you're providing for your audiobook listeners are just so important for us to all be aware of. These are the kinds of things I think that would be well taught, would be appropriately taught to all of us in a proper general education, but they're not. So here we are, and you're providing a lot of this information.
I'm a big believer in having fun while solving problems. The example of, this fig's looking a little droopy. What am I going to do about that? Well, use some cistern water and also wash the dishes for it. Well, I also take showers for the spinach. What I do before I take a shower is put a bucket under the tub spout, make sure that water's absolutely right, then take my shower, then afterwards take that water out to my vertical planter. I haven't planted the spinach seeds yet this year, but I'm planning to do that in the next few weeks as it gets warmer. Use that water to water that vertical planter. And by the way, down at the bottom of that planter, there's a little tube that runs out it used to barely get off the porch, and then I added more tubing to it. That's for the drainage, the excess water that flows out the bottom. That's now going out to my lemon tree. So giving it a little extra drink as it starts to warm up.
Yeah. Sharing the water. I love that. That's great.
So if you like problem solving, this is a great field to be in. And if you like to have fun while solving problems, bonus points.
Yeah, indeed. Tell us a little bit more about your podcast. I know it's just launched, and how your plan as a way to use that to both, spread the word about your content, these valuable insights and tips into how we can navigate the droughts in our area or navigate the water harvesting. So tell us how about your plan for your podcast and how you plan to help that also leverage your audiobooks.
At first, I'm keeping this short, sweet, and to the point. I'm not going to be one of those multi-hour podcasters, at least not to start. I'm exploring basic concepts in little bite-sized chunks, week after week, so over time people can build a body of knowledge. And I try to put some humor into it, like the latest episode that I recorded was about passive water harvesting features. And I started out by introducing it as a passive water harvesting system, which I have in my front yard. And right now it's bored. And the reason it's bored is because we've had very little rain since last August, and it's now April. So that system is looking for something to do, and I'll give it something to do. I'll talk about it.
Yeah, very good. Love that.
So have some fun with this. Oftentimes, I think the environmental movement is like, come on, guys, you're no fun. If you don't get people laughing and wanting to do things, and if you just want to frighten them all the time, eventually they're going to tune you out. In fact, they'll probably tune you out sooner rather than later.
Right. It's a lot to hold in a very, as serious as it is, it's a lot for us to hold. It can feel like a weight, whereas bringing in that humor, bringing in the fun of this problem solving really lightens that load so we can pay attention to the issue and still, feel like not only that it's manageable, but also that
it's doable.
We can actually do something about this. That's exciting.
There are things we can do, and they're really a lot of fun. And, there may be a few surprises along the way. I have inadvertent tomatoes in my compost bin. I apparently composted tomatoes. I threw some tomato pieces in there, and they had seeds. They sprouted. I don't have any tomatoes yet, but looks like I have to water the compost bin now. You need to do that anyway to keep it moist so it becomes compost. So there are times when I wash the dishes for the compost bin.
Yeah, nice. We had,
have some fun with it.
Yeah. When I lived in Marin County, I had a garden there as well as, having one now. And we had a white peach tree that grew out of our compost bin and actually produced peaches for us. And one year we had some kind of squash that was similar to a kabocha. I don't know. But it just took over all the space in between the raised beds. It was awesome. We had so many squash. I loved it.
I have yet to be able to do that with squash, so I have high hopes for these tomatoes. But yeah, that's the thing. And the thing is also about Marin County is it's very dry.
Yeah. Yeah. We had to be careful with our water.
You don't have that many storms coming off the Pacific, especially during the spring and the summer and most of the fall. In the wintertime, that's when you get your storms.
Yeah. Now, I also know you've been working with our social media and podcast team here at Pro Audio Voices. So I would love for you just to share a little bit about what that experience has been like for you and what you have gained from it so far.
I've learned how to use my mic. And that may sound like just a little thing, but you've probably heard those podcasts or radio shows or recorded at home where maybe the person's a little too far away from it and you can't hear them.
Right.
One of the tips I got with this one is you got to be real close to it. You practically have to kiss it.
Yep.
So That's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and it sounds great. So I just want to...
Thank you. Well, I just recorded another episode of the podcast this morning, and one of the things I mentioned earlier from the people who recorded is don't overthink this.
Yeah.
So this morning for this episode I got on, I just extemporized, let it flow. That works, people.
Yeah, that's
Don't
great.
get too scripted.
That's great. And yeah, so I want to encourage our listeners to subscribe to your podcast, Water Harvesting 101, as well as to check out your books on Amplify Audiobooks. And just want to ask you just a couple other things about your aspirations going forward and the kind of impact that you hope to have with your content.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make this accessible to people. City Nature, the book, the hardcover book, was meant to inspire. It shows lots of beautiful photos with plants, and my point there is this is brought to you by water harvesting. And 101 is like, well, what is water harvesting and how do you do it? I show pictures from my yard. And the ebook, it's probably the only water harvesting book you'll ever read that has pictures of a rusty watering can, a broom, and an old towel. And everybody has these things. They all relate to the water harvesting that I do at my place. These aren't just random objects. They have purpose. And they're fun.
Nice. All right. So check that out. And would you let our listeners know what your website is? Because that's always going to be the central information, the central place to go to learn more about what Martha's up to.
All right. For City Nature, it's citynaturebooks.com. Right now, it's just displaying the hardcover book information. Note to self, I need to add the audiobook information to that site. And for Water Harvesting 101, Waterharvesting 101 book.com for the book, and Water Harvesting 101 for the podcast.
Great. All right. Well, Martha, thank you so much for being with me today. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I'm excited to be introducing our listeners to your work. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
All right. And to our listeners, thanks, and we'll catch you next for the next episode of Audiobook Connection. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.